Hi everyone,
All right, we're back.
Mina Basilis from Pinnacle Accounting and Advisory, and I'm here with Kim,
Kim,
Sea Salt and Fitness,
Sea Salt and Fitness across all social platforms.
yes, who is a
Health and strength female coach.
fantastic.
So, how's it going today?
It's gone fantastic. Busy day, a few meetings,
Yeah.
a few emails, work that needs to be done, and but we're here catching up with you.
Amazing.
And
Thanks for having me on.
absolute pleasure. Thanks for having us.
What have we got above us? Because I don't think that they can fully
Thanks for your time. It
read
says
this.
be remarkable.
Be remarkable.
Yeah, and we're going to talk to Kim today about how to do exactly that.
Exactly.
Right? So, Kim, you've got your own business. Correct?
Yes, I have my own business.
Yep.
I am a female strength coach who specializes in building a healthy relationship with yourself, whether that is in the realms of with food, as we all know, or you may have experienced the whole evolution of a diet culture, whether that be in your conscious or subconscious minds, very prevalent in this day and age. I personally have gone through quite the experience myself, as throughout my entire life, dealing with the notions of body image, diet culture and whatnot, but then finding strength, especially strength, rather than pure fitness, really changed the game for me. So I started my business 2 years ago, exactly the 30th of September 2021. So
Yep.
it's been just over, or maybe it's 30th of August, just over 2 years in the game, but I've been in the industry for about 6-7 years, ever since leaving high school.
So why did you start your own business?
Why did I start my own business?
And how's that been? Yeah.
It's been a wild ride. I think, so I did my Cert 3 4 in fitness in 2018, year out of high school. That was, I guess that inspiration came from the fact that I did have an unhealthy relationship with my body and food back in 2017. Got to the lowest weight of my life, like 47 kilos. So I was a stick. You'll see the transformations on my Instagram. It's quite, I guess, extraordinary. But since then, so I did my Cert 3 4 in 2018, and then my sports science degree 2019 to last year. So I graduated start of this year in sports science, and I'm currently undergoing a diploma in counselling. But
Congrats.
thank you. But at Deakin, if any of you know the degree, and it was a great educational experience, but absolutely nothing beats life experience and the coaches that I've had throughout my journey. So I had my first fitness coach in 2018, who helped me get out of that toxic, I guess, neurological cycle of like having hyperfixations on it, really restricting my food choices and allowing me to have that like logical perspective of understanding micronutrients, how everything serves my body from a performance perspective as well in my training. But I was also someone who went to the opposite end of the spectrum, was training like crazy and exercising like crazy, burning off calories, all that stuff, to the point where it was quite toxic. And I think I was able to really channel that energy a lot better when I actually had more intention behind what I was doing and had more of the educational backing. So in answer to my long-winded answer, I started my business out of the pure passion that I knew I wanted to help females the same way that I had been helped from the start of my recovery journey, I guess, since 2018. So I started my business in 2021 because I realized that I was an in-person personal trainer at the time and this wasn't fulfilling like I wanted it to be. And I knew that all my coaches pretty much had their own businesses. So I've chopped and changed between different coaches depending on what I needed at the time. But now I compete in powerlifting and
Okay. Good stuff.
yeah, so I've done a few
I've
powerlifting.
seen the Instagram posts. Yes, I can see that.
Yes.
Fantastic.
So I love my squat, bench and deadlifts. That I also just love advocating for like a healthy mental and physical state of being and really being intentional around the day-to-day, because we only have so many hours in a day. We only have so much energy that we can give in our days. And
Yes.
I think like being able to channel that really well with an educational and an emotionally regulated backing to it is really pivotal.
You mentioned something, and this is a question probably the viewers would be asking. You mentioned you overtrained, and
Yes.
you mentioned that that's toxic.
Mm-hmm.
How do we link those together, and why would it be toxic?
Yeah, so I like to think of our health and wellness stage. We've got people on different ends of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got people who kind of quote unquote just don't want to move off the couch, who don't need the motivation, the inspiration. I've never been one of those people. I've been someone who's always very much like, I go all out, because of what I hear around me, and because that is the safe, in my mind, and I know a lot of people who tend to burn out easily, whether that's in work, in relationships, in the gym. Those are the kinds of people who first and foremostly I help, but also that I've come from that backing. There is a point in which you are exercising to the point where it is unhealthy, mentally and physically, because we only have so much energy that we can
expend.
Expend. And from a recovery standpoint as well. Like if we are, I personally, so if you want an idea of my week to week, now I train 4 times a week. I do boxing once a week. So that's an hour of boxing a week, 4 to 8 hours of strength training a week, but that is because you need a lot of rest in your strength training sessions. Like pure strength training, you do need a lot of rest.
I don't know how I feel sitting next to a boxer, to be honest, at the moment. You're not going to hurt me, are you? And powerlifter.
Oh, I'll try to get my. Yeah.
So are we talking about number of hours here? We're talking about the exercises that are being done, or is it a mix? Okay, the intensity. What about the mindset? Because I get the sense that we're talking about someone who is overtraining, but is not, or does not have balance in other areas of their lives. Is my understanding? Can you please go into that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So training to the point that they can't recover from. So we have this thing called minimal effective dose, which is the maximal amount of stimulus or what we place on our bodies in terms of intensity of training. That could come down to how much we do like steps in a day or how much energy we're just using. And we have to have this balance. But so I think the toxicity comes into it, especially from a mental health standpoint, because physical health usually precedes mental health. So what I mean by that is if you have a really good mental stable base and you're not trying to meet these excessive demands of you trying to exercise intensely, like over intensely, and that line between enough and over intensely, like it's a bit, it's different person to person, but if it's coming from a place of, I need to burn more calories, I need to, the notion of like having an Apple Watch and trying to just use your Apple Watch to have that validation that you're burning like heaps of calories, that can become toxic because you're going more and more and more and then nothing is ever enough. So that kind of person is the kind of person that I still like try to navigate around, but as in terms of the fitness side, I'm a lot better than I ever was before. And that's what I help with. So in terms of it being toxic, that is person to person dependent, but it is when you feel the need to do more and more and more and more to get X result or to meet the demands that diet culture and body image culture has then placed on you over the years. And what I find is when people enter the fitness space, they might enter because they just want to be healthier, maybe they want to lose some fat, maybe they want to build some muscle, body recomp, all that jazz. But as soon as you enter that, then the algorithm, then social media, then people around you have more of an influence on you.
Right.
But then you're dragged into supplements, you're dragged into doing HIIT classes every single day, you're dragged into and that becomes a stimulation that your nervous system actually adapts to. And then that is the thought process.
Yeah, my Instagram is full of things about
business,
weightlifting, weight training, supplements, the different ways of activating certain parts of your body, different muscles. So I agree with that. Again, body image. So and we have this thing that this body dysmorphia, like that. A lot of people, if you ever look at a video or a photo of you when you were younger, and when you were younger, you were like, oh, I look shit in that, I look big in that, all that stuff. You look now and you're like, I wasn't actually that big. Or maybe you're bigger now and you're like, how did I think I was big then? Yeah. That kind of notion, that is because we are saturated with these ideals or these unrealistic ideals, especially because each one of us is so uniquely different in our genetic makeup, our the pressures that we place on everyday life, our environment, like everything we're exposed to, will determine our habits, whatnot, will determine what is healthy, what looks healthy on us. So we're not really preaching to be skinny or to be fat here. Is that correct? We're just teaching or preaching really, find out what your body is, understand your body, have an appreciation of your body, and find out what's right for you. Is that correct?
Yeah. And like you were saying, you have all these things coming into your feed, like supplements and fat loss and all this kind of stuff. You're not fat, you have fat. And scientifically,
I like the way you phrase that. Yeah, because at the end of the day, fat is energy, right? It's stored energy.
Fat is important. Like fat is literally like you have fat to protect you. Females usually generally hold a high percentage of body fat because of our hormones to reproduce. Like I personally didn't get my cycle for 8 years.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because my body was in this fight or flight state where it could not produce a child because it was so stressed.
Right.
So I
love that you mentioned this. It's very fascinating.
Yeah. So there's so many avenues of I can go hard on this.
So females, no, please do speak a little bit more about it.
So it is.
So female, I'd like to understand.
There's different. So there's always like a logical and emotional side of the brain. So you've got like the logical side, which is very like science based. It's very like what is actually happening here. But the emotional side is like how do we speak to ourselves about this? How is everything that we're presented to? How does that feed into us, and we actually act like negatively off that? So we either toxically because at the end of the day, everything is so context dependent and not enough people understand that. So like what you're saying, supplements, like what is your idea of supplements?
My idea of supplements is things like ensuring I've got enough protein from all the muscle degradation that I've caused, or the fatigue. Right? It's not degradation, sorry. It's the fatigue. And I'm cognizant that I need to build more muscle. I need to provide protein to the body so it can build that muscle. Just as an example. Another one is vitamins and minerals, which I might not be getting from my food, but I need to take that religiously. I'm trying to lift heavier weight these days, so I've been told that I need to take anti-stress pills because lifting heavy weights, depending on if you're really warming up properly or not, can provide a lot of stress on your body, and your body should, for a period of time, go under stress, but you don't want to really take that outside of the training segment.
So what are these anti-stress pills?
You are really putting me on the spot here. I don't know the name off the top of my head. They are legal anti-stress pills.
I'll leave it there. But like
maybe you can tell us some good stuff to look at.
The idea of like supplementation, or to supplement what we are lacking in our body. So when people talk about supplements like fat burners and pre-workout and things like that, we don't need that stuff.
I take pre-workout. Yeah,
like pre-workouts, caffeine like in itself is effective. Like there have been studies on it that it does show that it does increase our capacity in a session. But when people talk about like things like fat burning supplements, for example, like they literally are stimulants to reduce your appetite, which they will probably catch up to you later in the day, but also doesn't take into account like the L-carnitine that they say that it has in it. So the fat burning product, we have enough in our bodies. We already have a saturated amount of L-carnitine. Anything else we're putting into it just goes straight through our body. It doesn't get used. It is not something, if you don't have the lifestyle factors there and you're just taking a fat burning supplement and it's not coupled with the habit shifts, that maybe the fat burning supplement is a kind of a placebo that makes you feel like you should do more of the habit shifts, which the habit shifts is what's going to change, is what's going to result in that fat loss or body recomposition or whatever your goals are if you were taking the right steps to get there. But that's why having a coach or having someone to guide you, and I would say not even just having a coach who meets you where you need, so who has experienced maybe a similar situation to you and who has the logical and emotional abilities to educate you. And I'm huge on education around this space because otherwise we develop all these ideas preconceived because of all these things from our environment, and we don't develop, and also we don't develop the confidence to then be able to know what our body needs and the autonomy to then go away from a coaching experience or whatnot, because we have all these people doing all these diet cycles and whatnot. They are just following challenges, they're following like whatever it is, but they don't have the same level of support that allows them to walk away and feel more empowered in themselves, because we have a huge retention rate of them gaining the body fat back. Or going back to baseline of what we did.
Because they're not building the habits. It's like maybe a lack of understanding of what is actually good and what is not good for me. And then looking at potentially how do I fit that within my normal day-to-day routine. A book that comes to mind, I'm not sure if you've read it or not, is Atomic Habits.
I've read it,
Have you read, what do you think of Atomic Habits?
Of course I've read Atomic Habits. Have you read Can't Hurt Me?
By David Goggins? I have.
All those kind of books. Atomic Habits is so good. Yes, I read. I didn't read it. I listened to the audiobook.
Yeah, it's the same.
Exactly.
You've taken stuff.
Absorbed it.
You've taken stuff from it.
Yeah.
One thing I like about atomic habits, it mentions specifically, is what they call habit stacking.
Yes, I now
Yes.
educate on that because actually one of my friends was really smart, didn't even know about Notion, and then I told him about habit stacking.
Yeah.
It's very good.
Yeah.
Yes.
So habit stacking, if people aren't aware of it, is doing one thing and then stacking another habit on top of that. So by the end of a program or a session, you've just done all these healthy things. They'll just help you to progress. For an example, I try when I go to the gym. I don't try. When I go to the gym, after this gym session, I immediately have my protein shake. And then straight after that, I have a cold shower, which really just helps me to wake up. But there's also very beneficial things that come from having a cold shower, correct?
I will interject there.
Yes, please do.
So the idea of cold showers is obviously there are benefits. Now the studies show that having a cold shower, immersing yourself maybe in a cold ice bath and whatnot after a session, what it does is it vasoconstricts all the blood flow. Now that's not necessarily good for someone who's just trained and is trying to have some muscle recovery by stimulating blood flow. So maybe don't do that.
So, hold on, Anna, because you stop me now, right? So are we saying that we shouldn't have a cold shower? We're saying maybe start with a warm shower first and then have a cold shower?
I would just say any cold exposure or cold therapy should be placed away from your sessions.
Right. That's interesting because based on my understanding is that when you have a cold shower, the blood actually is forced further outside into the external parts of the body, which helps with blood circulation.
So,
That's interesting.
Just cold in general. Have you ever heard of the rice method? So when you rest. So but the second one is ice.
Yes.
So that is an anti-inflammatory action.
Yes.
Now, when you're training, you want to inflame. Well, you don't want to, but what happens is you're breaking down muscle tissue in order for it to grow back stronger. So it's a stress to the body.
Yeah.
What happens is when your body's recovering, you don't want to give it a situation where there's no blood flow to stimulate the muscle recovery.
Right.
So by exposing yourself to ice, you're essentially doing the anti-inflammatory actions which are required, and inflammatory actions are required for the muscle to adapt. So I want to ask you now, how did this come about in terms of your knowing this, quote unquote? So in terms of the blood circulation, doing that when you're exposed to cold.
So, sorry, can you rephrase the question?
So you know how your summary of why you expose yourself to cold.
Yes.
When you said that it brings the blood circulation outside and then stimulates
it helps with blood circulation.
Yeah.
So long as obviously it's not too cold, it's just sufficient enough cold to get that going. At the same time, it makes me feel really, really awake, especially after a gym session.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we'll probably already feel awake after a gym session, but
if my body cools down, I actually don't feel in the mood for having a cold shower.
Yeah. So I would say first thing in the morning, cold exposure is really good mental resilience strategy. People go into like really cold exposure in order to bring up their stress tolerance because you feel on top of the world, you feel like you're really resilient against this, you feel in control in the moment, which is a lot of our core needs to feel in control as a survival standpoint.
I do scream like crazy, but I'm still in control, yeah?
Yeah, so it makes you feel powerful, right? But from a scientific standpoint, it's constricting your blood vessels.
Right.
So maybe first thing in the morning, and what I do, actually not at the moment, I would be a hypocrite in saying this, but in summer, I like to have cold shower first thing in the morning, or at the moment, usually just at the end of a shower, just warm until the end of a shower. But when I'm training afterwards, I'm just, maybe stretching or mobilizing my body, and that's enough. I just let my body do what it does, get enough protein, get enough carbohydrates to facilitate that, and then go on about my day.
Right. So no cold showers after the gym?
No cold showers after the gym.
Not even for a few seconds? Just to really get you to wake up?
Shouldn't you be already awake after a session? I guess you feel fatigued, but also you shouldn't walk away from every session if you were training for something feeling absolutely fatigued.
Right.
So at that point, I'd call it exercise or working out.
Okay.
So the way I coach is very much like a longevity standpoint. So what are we trying to achieve? Is muscle protein synthesis, so building muscle. And I think the habit shifts for the most part. If someone has come from like a place where they're just, so for the general person I work with who was taxing, their body, maybe not really sure what they're doing. They're in the gym, but they don't really have an intention behind what they're doing. Maybe they have some goals, which is generalized. They want to shape their body and stuff, but they're not really going about it in the smartest way. Yep. So we're talking about smart work, not hard work. And one of the things which I've taken with me into my coaching practices and into my own life, and I have a powerlifting coach myself who levels me up all the time. Yeah. And that in effect levels my coaching up alongside my current knowledge base and everything that I'm
very important to surround yourself with the right people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You are the combination of the top people that you surround yourself with.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
And I love talking about the psychology side of things too, and we'll go off in another direction
next session. Yeah. We'll have Kim back.
I stay here till 5 p.m.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
a few coffees. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, take whatever you will from that, but
So coach, again, having the coach there to help you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Oh, it's such a pivotal journey. Like smart work, not hard work, because hard work could have been so many things for each individual.
Yeah.
And there's so much, like there's so many nuances. There's so many ways and it's important to remember it's not your fault at all for everything that you believe or everything that you do. It's not your fault in any realm, and I'm not trying to say that. It's what you've been exposed to. We make our own conclusions of whatever we're exposed to.
Yeah, we're being bombarded with information all the time. Some of it's correct, some of it's not correct. Yeah.
I always say it's free value overwhelm. So we get all this free value. Who makes it to the top 1%? They're not consuming free value. They're consuming value that they have invested in themselves. Like the top people.
And they know where to go to get quality value too.
They know where to go to get quality value, but you don't even have to know where to go. Like momentum creates momentum. If you're staying in the same place, you're staying in the same place.
Yes.
There is a reason why you are overwhelmed, why you don't understand what is best for your body. And this translates, and we'll talk about all the interrelations into business as well. The gaps in your potential may be just a matter of channeling the energy that you have into smarter work. And how are you going to do that? You're going to invest in yourself to know how to get there. So I have, oh my God, my support network is huge.
Yeah.
But I have a powerlifting coach, I have a business coach, I have a nutrition and mindset coach, I have a psychologist, I have a dietitian. I also immerse myself in the space like every day in terms of like health and fitness, but I'm just studying a diploma of counselling as well. So there's all these elements that then I'm able to pick what resonates with and get all my advice that is tailored to me.
Yes.
And apply that to my coaching abilities, my personal abilities, and everything that is happening in your personal life. And this is why it's so really, really well-rounded as a starting base to work with a psychologist as well, is because whatever is popping up in your work life that feels shit is probably happening in your relationships, in your ethic just outside work life, what's happening in your personal life, how you show up for yourself.
Doesn't everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. My business coach is very big on that as well.
Just having the right mindset.
Yeah. Well,
making sure
and how do you do that? Yeah. How do you know if you don't have
surround yourself
help?
with the right people? You're going to have the right coaches. You're going to consume the right material.
And it's also, and I was going to say this earlier, the psychology side of things. Whatever we're normalizing in our lives is obviously a combination of who we surround ourselves with, but also the information that we surround ourselves with. So, I personally, like, I'm 24, right? But like, I get told all the time, like, oh my God, you've got a business and you're 24 and all this stuff. And I'm like, well, yes, but my first fitness coach, she was 17 when she started her business. So to me,
yes.
I am also quite a high achiever, which has obviously affected me negatively, but also can affect me positive. So I just have to know how to channel that energy. So negatively in terms of the toxic, overworking, burning myself into the ground, losing heaps of weight.
Hard versus working smart and hard at the same time.
Yeah. So like you can, obviously, like I'm not saying don't work hard, but there is a certain demographic who will absolutely like put burdens of themselves because we feel like we need to meet this standard. Maybe we've had some stuff in our previous history, and I'm not going to go into childhood trauma and all that stuff, but maybe we've had stuff in our past and people around us who have told or not told, but actions speak louder than words, shown to us that we need to work harder to get where we want to be. So therefore we develop these, and we go off on our own, and obviously because we're in our own company all the time, we develop these ways of thinking that are like, if I'm not working harder, then I'm not worthy.
Yeah.
So
and sometimes you can be working very, very hard, but not really getting much results.
Yeah.
And it's because there's no
guidance,
direction, there's no focus. Yes.
Scientific backing.
Yeah. We just get busy, and we feel that because we're busy, it's sort of like a way to comfort ourselves, right? I'll get busy, I'll keep busy just to make myself feel like I'm actually doing something. Yeah, I'm correct. Beautiful.
Yes, that's that's absolutely huge in our society today. Busy, 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 busy. Luckily, it's getting better in my world anyway. We all have these worlds because it's whatever we normalize around us.
Yes.
But a lot of people are still in this notion, and I am still working through this.
Yes.
Busy work versus effective work. We just do things because we feel good in ourselves and we feel worthier if we're being productive.
Yeah.
Is it really productive if at the end of the day it's burning you out? If you're not taking the time, self-care is so important. Like, it doesn't even be like, I know a lot of people are like, oh, self-care is just a marketing term to sell you things. No, it's not. Like, you should be able to sit with yourself, sit in the space of yourself. And I always say this, but the silence provides so many answers. Like, we sit in silence, and it doesn't mean that we have to be like a monk, but if we have that mindful time and time where we can sit back and evaluate what we need and where the gaps are in our potential and all these things, rather than going, go, 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 we can't then stop to be like, what do we actually need?
It's surprising how loud silence can be in terms of sitting there, really reflecting, seeing where we want to get to, seeing what we've done. In the business world, it's called gap analysis. You mentioned gap. It's actually called gap analysis, exactly where we're at, where we want to get to, what's hindering us, and how do we get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think unless you immerse yourself, obviously immersing yourself in the space of business is a very extreme example, because then you suddenly don't even realize that you have all these areas to work on. And I definitely did not think it would take me down a route of self-discovery that I thought it would. Like, starting my own business, absolutely just started it off a whim. Like, I was on the treadmill at my gym and I saw a reel pop up of my first fitness coaches, who turned it later into a business coach, but she was saying, like, if you just start now, like, she's a millionaire now and whatnot. I'm not there, but like, I would say that
it's the journey then.
It's the journey, and it's about embracing every part of the journey and knowing that growth doesn't just come in an objective sense, it can come very internally.
Can you talk to us, please, about the personal growth that you found
through business?
You've developed, yes.
Through business,
and potentially even more powerful, through business and fitness.
Yeah.
Because I find when I work out, I develop more of a resilient mindset.
Yeah. Oh, huge. When you get into the training space, that is the first step to then being a vessel to opening up so many self-growth avenues that you never even knew would happen.
I love that word, vessel.
It's such a vessel. I can say it a million times.
Yes.
I did actually a podcast recently with my first fitness coach who we were talking about that. If you haven't checked it out, or you probably haven't, but my podcast is Breaking Beliefs and Building Physiques on Spotify.
Yeah, we'll link it.
Yeah. Show notes. It's massive, because like, as soon as you enter a self-growth space, like fitness, you were suddenly surrounded with all these challenges that you were faced with. Positively or negatively, you have to navigate through it. And you have to find what at the end of the day will benefit you, because otherwise it will crumble you. And we oftentimes don't reach out to someone until we're in the deepest end and we feel like we really need help, which is an unfortunate situation, but it's just reality of things. Because a lot of the time people are like, I don't need help, until they really do. And that is solely independent on themselves and how they feel. It has nothing to do with externally what's going on in terms of how burnt out they are. Some people have a higher stress tolerance than other people, but that's from their whole life experiences. But you can only determine the inspiration that you need to then seek some guidance, seek some direction, seek some support in the avenues of scientific growth, like in terms of how you treat your body from like an actual educational perspective, but then also proving to yourself that you can change and having that accountability, because like we need to prove to ourselves that we don't have to stay in a cycle of thought through actually being pretty much held accountable and being guided, because you know, that's the saying, we have to get uncomfortable to get comfortable. They all intertwine into one another. It's like the growth as a just person in the fitness realm. A lot of people stop at surface level. A lot of people stop at, I'm just going to the gym a few days. Those are usually the people who have come from a place of needing the motivation, and motivation is just an imaginary term.
Right.
You
stop at the surface
level.
So are we talking about, okay, I go to the gym, I do these exercises, say, every day, or you know, I have some rest days.
Yeah.
But here it feels like we're talking about more moving into the psychological aspect.
It's kind of like just sticking to what you know and not knowing that there is more to always learn. Okay. So I think it's more like if you stick to the ways that you know, they could be positive or negative. They could literally just be like, I'll take me for an example. So before I hired my first coach, I was stuck in the notions of restricting myself, going to the gym every day, 2 times a day, running to and from school with my bag on my back. Probably not very good for my spine. So I reached this point where I was kind of fed up and I had reached rock bottom. And then what happened was,
in terms of your training?
I reached rock bottom in terms of my mental health. Like I was fed up with feeling like I had to restrict myself all the time, like holding myself to eat until I was absolutely starving, and I was like absolutely crying, whatnot. Yeah. And I was challenging myself all the time to eat later in the day, fast for longer, all these kinds of notions that we're faced with that is healthy until it is unhealthy. Right. But then I'm learning more and more and more as I get more and more help from the people that I need at the time, or that I feel like I need at the time. So my first fitness coach opened me to the light of I can really actually structure my days in a way that's not doing a heap of different exercises, but really be intentional about the mind to muscle connections made there. Yes. And understand how to move my body optimally. Now, it wasn't until my second fitness coach in 2020 that I was exposed to moving more optimally than my first fitness coach, because my first fitness coach was all online, and she gave me programs, did the weekly check-ins and things like that I now do with my girls. But my second fitness coach was very much more about, she was in person with me as well, which is why I also offer in person now, because I've learned through each coach that I've had in what is effective and what hybrid I can make of it. But she got me to really hound down on my technique, which totally changed the game for me and how I move. And a lot of people don't understand the intention that you can have behind this, but it actually also teaches you a lot about being mindful. Like, I am the most mindful in my sessions, which actually only came about this year because my coach now is a powerlifting coach. So I've had 4 coaches. I also coached myself for a period of time at last year. But for the most part, I've had coaches. It's very much been me dropping any ego and having that shift of being like, I don't know everything. I don't care if I've done a degree. I don't care if I've doing a diploma and all these things. I still don't know everything from a practical standpoint, because all this stuff is theoretical when you go to uni.
Yeah. I feel sometimes even if we do know all these things, having someone to bring in that perspective, that angle, can help so much.
And who has been where you want to grow from. So that is why I work with females who are very hard on themselves, or they might not even be hard on themselves, but they just don't really know what to do. And they have these kind of goals, but they haven't really figured out why they want these kind of goals. Yes. And then you can actually be like, hey, what are the core values that you have? What are the preconceived beliefs that you have? And then educate them around the scientific, education that they need to excel. But then more than that even is proving to them that they can apply it and that it works for them. So it's not about just educating plus applying it to your life. And the only way they'll do that is they have the accountability and someone telling them that it's okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Because your nervous system is so in tune with being scared of any other possible conclusion. You don't know what's on the other side of doing all these actions. A lot of females will be scared of fat gain. Males, that also, but I think more so for males, it's more about not being muscular enough as well.
I'm frankly trying to lose weight. Yeah, it's been a difficult journey. I think I need to do a lot more sort of HIIT type fitness, but I've been focusing a lot on muscle gain. Muscle gain, knowing that burns throughout the day. But it's also really looking at my diet and making sure that my macros are balanced.
Yeah.
To facilitate
and how do you know that?
How do I know that?
How do you know your macros are balanced and that you need to do more HIIT?
I speak with people and I reach out to people and get their consultation.
Yeah, I think it is.
To do more of that too. My Fitness Pal helps somewhat in terms of tracking. What else?
Well, it's all individualized, right? Like maybe that's not even what you need. Maybe it's more about being smart with your training, being on a program, and
getting a coach to work with me on a more regular basis.
To be honest. But like I think everyone should have a coach, to be honest. Like and I'm not saying that to pitch my services or whatnot.
Yes. For different areas of their life.
Like I'm not saying that to pitch my services at all. I don't even care if you hire me or not. Like I'm like, if somebody resonates with you and they have a level of knowledge that you don't and they are applying it to their life and they're a good role model for you, absolutely I'd look into it, because like there is nothing like putting yourself in not even a vulnerable situation. It's a situation where you've let your ego aside and you're like, I don't know everything. And seeing the gaps. What did you say? Analysis gaps?
Gap analysis.
Gap analysis?
Yes.
Yeah, there we go. So
she's going to be dropping these terms now in the next few podcasts.
Yes. I'm a huge advocate for, like, one day I want to be on a TV show, one day I want to be a radio presenter, one day I want to be That's it. But no, I do speak a lot of my story and I'm very passionate.
SWOT analysis too.
SWOT analysis, I have heard of that.
Strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
I do like squats, but I like that. I like that one.
You do like what? Squats?
But I do like that one too.
I like squats too.
Isn't it SWOT analysis?
Yes.
SWOT. Oh.
SWOT.
See, I think you said squat at first, and then I was like, wait, I thought it was SWOT.
You can tell she's a squatter.
It's just like, you know how when you're like in a shopping center or something and you hear someone call your name and you haven't heard anything else from the situation, but you hear that,
immediately
it's like
someone's
that.
referring to me.
So I heard squat, not
It's amazing
squat.
how we associate things to things that we already know.
Human beings.
Can we take another lane just for a second?
Yeah.
Sort of not completely different, but you mentioned you're doing counselling, sports counselling. Why are you doing that?
Huge element. I want to be able to have more of an emphasis in the qualification standpoint, as well as being able to provide services that aren't solely like coaching in the fitness space, but also in the eating disordered space. So there's a few courses that I want to be doing. So my diploma of counselling, but coupled with an eating disorder actual top up unit. That is through the eating disorder development. It's a professional development course that you can do online, but a few of my friends have done that, and like one of my best friends who's a psychologist has done it, and she said it's really good. Okay. But I just want to be able to have, because there is, I don't know if any of you watching know or are immersed in the fitness space, but there are a lot of coaches these days.
Yes.
Like a lot.
Yeah.
And in order to stand out, and in hindsight, I look at a lot of coaches and I'm like, well, they're very, some of them are very niche, some of them are broad, some of them should be more niche because they might not have every single basis covered and maybe more specialized in other areas. But I think that in order to stand out, having that diploma in counselling could be very beneficial. But I have such a big emphasis on like, breaking down the whys behind the values behind like what their actual goals are, not what they think they need, what they actually need.
So can you give us an example? What are we talking about? Are we talking about I feel like I need to go to the gym to look a certain way versus what mindset am I trying to achieve or am I trying to further develop by going into the gym.
Yeah, so you have these goals, but then you've got to understand that sometimes we think we need to do certain things, like you might be like, I'm going to go to the gym more and do my HIIT workouts, things like that. But at the end of the day, that might not be what you actually need in order to achieve that body recomposition that you're looking for. Obviously, there is a big nutrition standpoint that comes into play there, and the macro split's important, but it's also important to look at like your stress levels, like in the day-to-day, like your water intake, like how much volume you're putting through your body in your strength sessions, if you're actually on a proper progressive program that allows you to then exponentiate your growth as an, I like to say, athlete, because if you treat yourself like an athlete, you don't have to necessarily be all in or out, but you're working smarter, not harder. So you're working in a way that facilitates what you actually want to be achieving, and also just to really live harmoniously in your body, like, and in everyday life, so that you can have the happiest life where you're reaching your highest potential and you're continuously growing on that. What I like to say, I literally work with a mindset coach, and we're talking about the fact that you may like have this potential that's like untapped, but at the end of the day, like you don't really know where it is. And I think like if you're working towards a goal, if you are not trying to grow and you're not investing in yourself, then you're not really growing, you're just living off yesterday's win. So you're living off everything that you've done up until this point, and as I was saying before, momentum creates momentum. So as soon as you decide that maybe you need to take a different trajectory, or like you have these goals and you kind of plateauing, and in my bio I say like we stopping plateauing and starting like treating yourself like an athlete.
I think life, I feel, has a way of, you said momentum creates momentum. I feel like if we genuinely find out what our purpose is, what our why is, then slowly, we're going to move more and more towards that. Now, the right people will come along, right? It's also about us being proactive and trying to find the right people, right? Reaching out to coaches, reaching out to people who have similar mindsets. So, for example, I might have a coaching session with a coach and they'll tell me the right form to go through as I exercise, but going to a gym with my friend and applying that form, working through that form will just elevate me even higher, because then I've got somebody else who's actually encouraging me and pushing me even further.
Yeah, and to give you an idea, like my girls who are doing like their squat, bench and others, we are touching up technique all the time. I'm even touching up technique all the time with my coach. And you have this level where you can execute really well on one weight, and then the next week you go up in weight, and you have to learn how to execute effectively in that way as well. And there's always ways of moving your body, and everyone's morphology is different. So everyone's limb length ratios are different. Everyone's like, the amount of tension you can create in the bar, but I think the common denominator is like with like bank lifts and whatnot, creating as much of a balanced and stable base as possible, so that you can remove any energy leaks, or in other words, like any amount of energy that is not effective towards the pure lift, the pure concentric of the movement. And you can really that comes down to the intention in your setup position, like how intentional you are in minimizing the amount of energy you take to go into your setup position, and then executing in a way that's really smooth, it's really balanced, it's really stable. And that goes for your top sets, which may be like 1 repetition max, but not max for the most part, just a 1 rep. And then your back downs, which is like your multiple reps after like your main rep, which is how this is talking in a powerlifting setting, but I think like for yourself, yes, absolutely having someone to look back on your sessions. I personally get my clients to like send me videos if they're with me online, and then I send them video feedback through Loom recordings, or I send them text or voice, whatever's most feasible in the moment, however much visualization they need from the feedback. But when it comes to, that's when you really hammer down on the things. You've obviously got to master the fundamentals. That's the first thing. Not ignore the fact that growth, because I think a lot of people, when we talk about sitting in the silences and all these mindful things and whatnot, a lot of people these days, or nervous system, like that's huge amount, a lot of people are like, oh, it's a bunch of voodoo, like all that kind of stuff. They just dismiss it because it hasn't been talked about enough. So therefore they just haven't heard of it. So But as the science and as we are studying more and as we learn more about the human body and the way that we move and the actual adaptations that occur when we do this in a positive way, then like you can't dismiss that anymore.
Science-based, yes.
Yeah. So like talking about the nervous system, the adaptation, that is not voodoo whatsoever. Like it's a part of our bodies. It's like just talking about like how our heart works. It's part of our circuitry system. Like it's the same thing. We're just talking about our nervous system, but we've only recently, and from what I've been exposed to as well, and you probably can agree.
Stress. You want them around.
Oh, stress is huge. Stress is
to
good,
produce results,
but not enough.
But too much stress with everything in moderation, everything in the right doses.
And you know what stress is? Stress is like applying a certain stimulus to our body in order for ourselves to recover and adapt stronger next time.
Yes.
So you can talk about that in the training sense, but you can also talk about that in the personal development sense. So exposing yourself to cold, like ice baths or cold therapy, whatnot, that's a way of increasing your stress to just being more resilient in everyday life.
Yes.
But there is so many levels of like stress on the body, like even like consuming a lot of caffeine. That's too much of that isn't like probably a negative stress on the body. It's a lot of stimulation on the body. Then I'm a hypocrite.
Way too much. Too much. 3-4 cups of coffee maybe sometimes.
I go down energy drink essential.
Yeah.
But like I'd say like if I'm doing more than 2 energy drinks, usually that's because I like the taste of it. But you know what? Like we like the taste of it, but would you like the taste of a soft drink that tastes the same, that didn't have caffeine, that tastes the same way? Like would you like because you probably like the taste as well, right?
I think the taste is nice.
At a physiological level, we're addicted and we don't even realize. We just think, oh, the taste is cool, but our body craves it. And have you ever, when you really, really want water and you're like, water tastes so good right now.
Yes.
Water tastes good because your body freaking needs it.
Yes.
So when we don't really want water and we're like, it's the same concept. So it's the same with caffeinated drinks. Like, like you've got your Monsters, your Red Bulls, my favorite's Musashi Grape. But like, it's one of those things where if we are craving the taste of it, like, would you want a decaf coffee? Like, would a decaf coffee taste the same to you as like a regular coffee? Even if the bean was they can't be the exact same, but even if the bean was like a decaffeinated version of like the main bean, they taste it in theory the same, but it's only the added element of caffeine, which doesn't have a taste. It's a
substance.
Chemical. It's like
that stops the feeling of being tired.
Well, yeah,
delays it.
Yeah, so like I find having caffeine's a habit, which honestly, like I do not need. Like I already have enough stimulation.
I wouldn't be able to answer your questions because I just haven't had anything that's really decaffeinated. It's always been, if I was going to have a drink and it's say caffeine drink, usually I'll just have the caffeine version.
Yeah, true.
So
But if you were deciding between a Red Bull and just a soft drink, not a Diet Coke, not a Coke.
I like my vanilla Coke.
Yeah, but that also has caffeine in it.
Yeah, does it? Yeah,
caffeine in it. There's Coke and caffeine, unless you have there's a non-caffeinated Coke.
To be honest, for a period, I just went straight to soda water. I was doing soda water. I didn't have any of those energy drinks. It was just simply just coffee.
And then you reduce your tolerance.
Yeah, but then when I go on break on holidays, I'm cognizant of I don't need coffee.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I try to wean myself off the coffee. And then when I get back, I'm not as dependent on the coffee. I want to ask you something else. I've asked a few things already. What is the difference between men and women in terms of their exercise requirements? Is there a difference?
Yeah, I think talking about that makes for confusion. At the end of the day, no. There may be a difference in how well we adapt to volume. Women tend to be able to adapt, be able to handle more volume, but we also need probably more warm-ups in our training, whereas males can go less warm-ups and more straight into the lift. So there's a little discrepancy in like the volume that we can handle, but in terms of...
When we say volume, are we talking about reps?
So volume is weight times rep. So volume is the total amount of like stress you place in your body.
Females can tolerate more. Wow, that's...
Yes, but males don't need as much to get the same amount of like adaptations. Like, so generally in strength training terms, like I can't say that's for every situation, but in terms of the exercises and the way that we train, no. Like I think if you go down that route, people haven't mastered the fundamentals enough for that to be that to even care, like that to even be a worry, cause a concern. I think like for the average person, or even for the person who's very hard on themselves, talking about that can lead to that whole free value overwhelm that we talk about. So it's very context dependent. So just like anything, if you're even like what I'm talking about doesn't necessarily apply to you. But from a very basic human standpoint, there are absolutes to how our body like functions, and that comes down to just how the body functions at a scientific level.
Yeah.
But then beyond that, it's always context dependency, and
so it's about bodies being complementary.
Yeah.
So men and women being complementary to each other. That's
and like from a training standpoint, females don't need to do, I don't know, all these like things. Females don't need to do more HIIT. They don't need to, they are smaller individuals, so generally they don't require as much energy to like function as a whole because they're small individuals. So therefore, like in terms of like calorie requirements and whatnot. But when it comes to like training, like
the same concepts apply.
The same concepts, the same way of training applies. Females don't need to do higher rep workouts in order to get like, that's just not like, I feel like that notion has pretty much gone out the window now. But there's all these, think about all like the fads that you're exposed to and like how it's so targeted at women for like the weight loss shakes and all this kind of stuff. It's like, and there's this brand called the Man Shake and the Lady Shake. You know the Man Shake.
Is that marketing? Is that just pure marketing?
It's pure marketing. You know the Man Shake has 2 more grams of protein per bar, and that's the only difference. Like they have the bars, the Man and the Lady Shake. There is 2 more grams of protein in the Man bar. Yeah, so I always get the Man bar. Like, fucking hell, like what? But
see, that's what happens when you look at detail. Right? When you look at detail, you're like, no,
look at your bloody packaging.
Correct.
Like,
analyze that stuff.
Yeah. So like when people say like, oh, I could go down Hydro route of nutrition and labeling and packaging now, but there's all those like weight loss lollies and like there's all this bullshit in our society that then like the only reason why they weight loss lollies is because they like suppress hunger for a short amount of time, but you don't like, you want to be able to thrive no matter what. Like you want to be able to grow and work towards your goals no matter what. If you are relying on things because you are scared of the alternative, whether that is what you're doing in the gym, what you're doing in your nutrition, then you are working off scarcity. You're not working off a place of striving, satisfied and being happy regardless. Like, I think there is a time and place for every single protocol that we give someone. When it comes to marketing stuff, also like, so the if you look on the back of packets and you see like for example, I bought this a while ago, I put on my story, and it was like protein chocolate, and it was like the calories are like the same, and I was like, well, there's only 5 grams. Or was it like 5 grams of protein per serve? So the packaging says 20 grams of protein for the whole bar, but the whole bar is like 500 calories. So you can get 20 grams of protein, and there's 24 grams of protein per 100 grams of chicken breast raw. So if you're comparing these, there's so much marketing. It's like the chicken is cheaper. Per 100 grams and provides more protein than this chocolate bar that you are buying. In saying that, obviously, like there is a time and place for everything, but the awareness needs to be there.
Would you recommend, I know you're a female coach, like you help females in that area.
I've recently been debating on the, because I have been reached out to by a few guys, and I've like, I have taken on some male clients, but were you going to ask the reasoning and if I would take on males? Is that what you were going to ask?
Well, you've actually ventured into that territory. So,
okay. Well,
so might as well, since we're there, might as well.
Yeah, I think the reason why I work with females mainly is because I come from that background where I struggled with things, and I know there was a lot of pressures on females to fit a certain, so they can relate to me more as well. In saying that, like, if I worked with a male and they had, obviously there are males and they're absolutely, like, it's like any mental health thing these days, males have been suppressed into acting very macho and acting like they don't have these problems, but they do, and I recognize that.
Guys don't tend to open up unless they find the safe space.
I think there's some sort of gap in the market for female coaches who help males, and I've been thinking about it. Because a lot of male coaches will be very objective with their male clients. Like they won't look into the psychology side. I know a few male coaches who are very good and do that. And they do look into the psychology side. But if you have a male who's going to a male coach who's putting you in a deficit and being all that macho talk, then you are, and you do or you do not have preconceived notions that would make you more hyper fixated on like negative relationship with your body and food, then it kind of stands to reason that these female coaches who are very much about that with females, there is like a bit of a...
I think we sort of touch up on an interesting topic here, which is toxic masculinity.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And even toxic femininity, right? Not that I hear that term being used, right?
Yeah,
but at the end of the day, I think anything can be toxic where it's not the right balance and it just goes beyond the realm of sustainability and just being unhealthy.
Yeah.
And I think guys would love to hear that validation from females, right? And particularly that emotional angle. Not that I don't believe that men can't be emotional. Obviously, at the end of the day, a lot of the marketing out there focuses on the emotions of people, and that's how they sell. It focuses on emotions. Because as human beings, we are emotional. We're emotional creatures.
People will find out pain points and they will tap on them however they can, and that's where a lot of the marketing comes down into, especially selling weight loss products. That's huge, but anything really. And I know that I'm only saying that because I'm in the space and haven't really absorbed the other things that people target, but there is always going to be pain points in every single realm. And if you are buying things out of an emotional state, which a lot of people don't even realize, it's very subconscious. It's like a lot of things that we do in life is very subconscious. But when we bring that into our conscious and we're like, oh, I'm buying this because I would feel shit if I didn't buy it, then that's where you feel shit in doing things.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when people force you to drink alcohol and then you feel shit about buying like alcohol and then like whatnot. Like I've never been someone who feels like they need to. I don't really drink that much anyway, but
I don't drink much,
but like I know that is a huge thing, especially like in teenagers, early 20s.
It becomes more of a culture thing.
Yeah, well, that's true. But like, you feel shit in doing things that you don't value with, and that you're doing out of a scarcity mindset, and then like people
it's a group mentality too. I feel that
it comes back around to normalizing who you're.
Yeah, and it helps me to belong.
Yeah.
The group identifies people
11,
who drink and go crazy and do all those stuff.
So from an 11,
necessarily needed. Yeah.
Us 11. Evolutionary standpoint, we all want to fit in. Like we needed to in order to get food when we were in the caveman days. Like it's just how we naturally have evolved.
I think it's important to fit in, but you need to approach that from a healthy perspective. Yeah. So for me to fit in, I need to find people who have similar values that I have, rather than say fit in with people who don't have the same values, because that's not going to be helpful to me or anyone really around me, and I'm going to reset myself, right? So I think that's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to values, what would you say are your top values?
My top values?
Yeah.
Some
people don't even know what their values are. So
it's a hard question. Yeah. It's something that I always have to go back and think about. My value is to be as helpful as I possibly can to the people around me, to be able to look after myself.
Yeah.
To be independent, right? Yes. What else? To be strong and resilient.
Yeah.
That's just a few of them. What about you?
See, because I had this conversation yesterday, so it's fresh in my mind. Passion, freedom, and empowerment. That goes hand in hand with resilience. Yes. Yeah. But I think a lot of people think about values like respect and communication, trust and loyalty, but that's also externally reliant. So you have like in situations where you've had to lie because of a certain thing, but you didn't feel shit about that because it was situation dependent. So values, the core values, so they're like sub values. But they depend on the core values. So like the core values are very independent, like they're there no matter what. So you always want to stick to wanting to feel empowered all the time, because that goes hand in hand with having control over your life as well.
I also think if you don't empower yourself, you can't empower the people around you.
Exactly.
If you're sinking, you can't save somebody else.
Yeah.
You're all going to sink type of thing. That's not to say be selfish and don't look at other people around. It's empower yourself as fast as you possibly can, so you can actually extend and
the only way you can empower yourself, and that's why they talk about self-care being so fundamental and being able to work on yourself so that you can help other people. Because if you're sitting in a place of scarcity, of self-hatred and everything like that, that's going to project onto the people around you.
I think it was Stephen R. Covey who coined the phrase, look after yourself for me.
Yeah.
Right? That really goes to show that if we don't look after ourselves, not in a selfish way, but in a way that I generally want to look after other people too.
Yeah, but it's not selfish. It's absolutely not selfish, and you know that.
Yeah.
It can be, the way that we talk about it can be perceived as selfish, but that's to the person who hasn't quite surpassed that notion that it's not selfish, and that we have grown up in an era that's like busy work, don't look after yourself, so provide for family, like, you know, obviously back in the day it was like women provide for the family, and obviously that has connotations of not looking after yourself maybe as much and all that kind of stuff, and for males probably like a similar situation in other circumstances. But if we don't grow internally, we can't expect for that to project. I think, like, have you heard of like the sayings of people talking these days about if your nervous system and like the way that you're insecure, like if someone else is talking negatively to you, it's just them projecting their insecurities or anything else going on in their life to you. So like, I think always respecting that that's just going to be there no matter what, because that's a part of human psychology. These all go hand in hand with each other. But it's cool. Like, once you start looking into this space, like, your growth can be exponential, because you have untapped this potential in your mindset and the way you view things and the way that you look after yourself, and then everything flows so much better.
Can I ask you a few more questions? Who are your top influences, and some books that you have read that you can recommend?
Top influences. I wouldn't say I look up to anyone in particular.
Interesting.
I think I've always been someone, and I think I'm growing more and more in the space. I think this goes into mindset. When you have people who look up to, like, really, really religiously, I think you can be easily impressionable to the point where you're not actually looking internally and you're seeking external validation from somewhere. But I do like getting inspiration from, I do really admire like David Goggins and everything that everything that he pushes, even if some of it's very extreme, but it's obviously proving his point over and over again.
Have you heard of Jocko Willink?
I think so.
Look him up. He's a ex-Navy SEAL.
Ross Edgley?
Commander.
He's
I don't think I've heard
British.
of it. Someone to look up.
Not the British channel, all around Britain. All around Great Britain.
I'll look into it.
He wrote The Art of Resilience. That's the book.
All right. Jocko Willink wrote Extreme Ownership.
Extreme Ownership. I have.
Other leadership books,
Yes. The Mountain Is You was very good. Okay. It's a book with a black mountain shaded in.
Who's that one?
Beats me now. I read it along the way. Yeah. That was very good. I think we can all take bits and we can resonate with bits and find what sticks from people who we look up to, but I don't think we should take anything as gospel, especially because we're all so unique.
We need to tailor it to our own experiences. Some principles are principles and they will apply to various situations. Potentially how we slightly tweak those is situation dependent and dependent on each person's personality.
So that is both helpful and unhelpful.
Savor what you can from that.
Yes. But at the end of the day, it is helpful advice always. Other than that, in the fitness space, Hattie Boyle, I love her. She represents Muscle Nation, which is a fitness brand, but a clothing line. But she is very in tune with how especially females. I went to her seminar, which was training for the female strength athlete a while ago with and it'll come to me. He's Australian strength coach on Instagram, but anyway, he was in cahoots with Hattie on this running of this 3-day seminar, 2-day seminar. It was very, very good. So I really like her. HATTIEBOYDLE. How do you want it? Yeah, and other than that, nothing comes off the top of my head. I kind of just stick to the same lane. My inspirations are my coaches.
Yeah.
And
they probably have, well, not they probably have, they've got a wealth of experience, and they have separate, their own obviously influences.
Yeah, and
they really bring that together.
And you know what? They have coaches too.
Yes.
And absolutely, I love investing in someone who's investing in themselves.
Amazing.
Because they are practicing what they're preaching.
Amazing.
And and I know especially like as I grow as a coach, I am looking up to my coaches and they are helping me grow as a coach in all different avenues. But I will, like whoever I take on will probably always be one step up and up and up. So if I'm able to help them where they're at. And I have my main demographic of helping females is the female who's already has experience in the gym, but is sort of they're just frustrated in the fact that maybe they have a poor relationship with their body, maybe they have a poor relationship with food, maybe they just don't understand what they need to do in order to generate the results that they want. So they're just doing everything that they can find. They've tried a million diets, they've tried building muscle for a certain amount of time, but they can't.
How does, might be a strange question, but I'm brave enough to ask, how does the menstrual cycle affect people?
Yes.
In the gym, in terms of at a biological level, and at a mental mood level.
Yeah. So it's a very, very good topic. So I think that for females, obviously we have these hormones that are fluctuating throughout our cycle. That cycle, and I think some of the notions around that we have developed to think is that you have to train, you have to eat a certain way around your cycle, you have to, that they last only 28 days, like all these things that aren't true. So they can last anywhere, a healthy cycle anywhere from like 28 to upwards of 35, 40 days.
Right.
And on average throughout our life, and I've literally got this straight from Hattie, who has been in the industry forever, 9 cycles across the year. So even if it's 9 cycles across the year is around that 35-day mark, rather than it has to be exactly 12 cycles a year. And also the way that you eat and train is not actually conclusive person to person. Like you're not necessarily going to have the same symptoms as the next person. Like you're not necessarily going to feel like shit all the way on your last week of your cycle. So we've got days, we've got around the first week. So if we're talking 28-day cycle, the average person up until day 14, and then you have around the ovulation phase of approximately day 11 to probably 17. And then you've got your luteal and it's off the top of my brain.
Yep.
Yeah, you've got your main stages, but there's the 4 stages, and then but you don't need to necessarily eat and train to an exact amount. And I think a lot of people have gone too far in that notion and saying you have to eat and train a certain way around your cycle. You don't. It's very person to person independent,
right.
And it is understandable if a female feels weaker the week before her cycle and maybe the first few days of her cycle. But
right. So how does that affect the training?
So we just work with that. It's just but it's very person dependent. So I don't change.
So we need to be cognizant of who we are and how our system operates.
Yeah, and each one of us will experience different symptoms. I don't get any cramps. I don't really know what myself. A lot of the time, I track it, but I don't physically experience a heap of shitty things. I experience maybe a bit of bloating, water retention, that kind of notion.
Yeah.
But I would pin it down to the fact that I train and eat quite nutritionally dense foods, that I don't really experience some of the symptoms that
right. So
a female would, and also down to genetics as well. There is a component always, and that's why it's very context dependent. And that's why with my girls, I just we work through that. I get them to do weekly check-ins. I talk with them throughout the week all the time anyway. But it's all about just catering to them.
That's a topic you're cognizant of throughout the training program.
Well, every check-in, I say where are you at in your cycle?
Yes.
I don't agree with the pill if anyone's asking about that, because there can be various negative side effects to that. Some females will work well off it, but when they come off it, they feel shit. And doctors will be that's the easiest route to go down in order to regulate your cycle. It's really it's quite unhealthy, for the most generation, playing with your hormones. And like they're there for a reason. Everything that is natural in nature is regulating for a reason. And it's, if we're looking from like a health standpoint, and everyone's idea of health is quite different based on like what they've been exposed to, but from like a biologically healthy standpoint, you're better off to work with your cycle, not against it. It's like that with everything. I was also going to say earlier, we were talking about like energy drinks and the caffeine notion and us craving water when we actually need it.
Yes.
When it comes to, I was going to say this earlier, when it comes to like hunger and hunger signals, I was talking this recently on my story. If we are hungry and we have been told that it's like a boredom kind of hunger, like when you're just like feeling like food, but you're not like physically feeling the hunger symptoms, that is a very valid reason to eat, because our psychology, our mind and body connection is so much greater than we can ever experience. And sometimes we have that disconnect where we're trying to do all these things because we have neurologically, or our mind has become a bit fucked, and we feel like we need to do X, Y, and Z, but then we work against our body's physiology and what it needs. And like the fact that you may be feeling like it is boredom hunger and you're like having that hyperfixation on food, it's probably telling you something. Like I remember when I was in my eating disorder and I was thinking about food like 24/7 because your body just needs more food. But I had kind of shut off. Like there's this thing that happens with people with eating disorder. We can really effectively shut off their hunger. Their body down regulates to a level that their body can like basically manage, and that means shutting off like your reproductive systems. That means shutting off some hunger cues. That means like there's so many things that happen with people with eating disorders and the ways that our bodies adapt to that. Which we didn't have that back in the caveman days. So like our bodies have to like adapt to what we're exposed to, but our bodies are so smart.
It's because we were so active we're always doing these things.
There's a factor there.
Yeah.
But our bodies are so smart, like it is crazy.
Okay. Amazing. Thank you very, very much for that session. Are there any key takeaways that we should walk away with?
Don't believe everything you're exposed to, and reevaluate why you do certain things. Reevaluate what feels like kind of shit. And
Get a coach.
Yeah, but like the first step, I think, before that, in order to actually realize that maybe you could tap into some untapped potential, is to look at what feels like it could be better. And we don't always know that, which is kind of makes it a roundabout double-edged sword. But it's all about being like, am I living for the moment? And am I really striving? And like, do I want to see what else is out there? And like, I don't know what your potential is, and you need to let down that wall of thinking that you can do it on your own, because there reaches a point in which people hit rock bottom, or they're like, oh, maybe I actually don't know everything, but there needs to be something that inspires them to think that way. Like they need to be exposed to something that they're like, oh, I didn't think about that like that. Oh, maybe my training could be altered a bit, right? Oh, maybe I should actually be achieving my results so much faster. A coach just fast tracks the process for you to get to the end result of what you actually need. And I think eventually if we're hitting rock bottom, if we're not hitting rock bottom, we're trying to get as far away from that and trying to feel happy in our day-to-day lives, we will find some way. It's like momentum creates momentum. We'll find some way. Yeah. But if we just stay where we are, we're just going to stay where we are.
Yeah.
And don't believe everything you see here online, because our bodies are so uniquely different. And not even our bodies, just, I'm not even talking about the fitness space. Like this applies to every single freaking thing in the universe. Like if you're hearing stuff online that's you just Google searched, free value is actually not value at all.
Yeah. It sort of gives you a small piece, right? Sometimes that small piece in itself is not correct, but it's also about making sure that you get those different pieces and working with someone who will put that jigsaw together so you can have your own piece of the puzzle.
That applies to you.
Yeah, that applies to you. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
No worries. I could talk hours.
Yeah, we look forward to doing another one with you soon.
Yeah. If you want to hit me up, my Instagram, Sea Salt Fitness. I've also have my podcast on Spotify, Breaking Beliefs and Building Physiques. Website, seasaltfitnesscoaching.com. And then you can join my email list. You can message me if you have any questions. Yeah.
Fantastic. You know where to go. You can tell she's very, very passionate, right? And she doesn't just come from a fitness perspective, but also from a mental and psychological perspective, which is very important.
Yes. Thank you for having me on.
Pleasure.
Pretty much just invited me in here. I didn't even know what to expect. I just ramble on.
Cheers.